In this tutorial I will show you how to knit step by step this jacket. It's easy, you have to start. We start in one sleeve, continue making some increases to the front part, continue making the back part, the other front part, and finish the other sleeve, and then we make the front part and the neck. To make the 2-year-old jacket, we need 350 grams of this yarn. The recommended needles are 5 mm, 5 mm circular needles, 60 centimeters needles, scissors, needle, and 3 buttons. Remember that you can find the materials in our online store, in our online shop, and you can find the pattern for other sizes in our website. For a 2-year-old jacket, we have to cast on 36 stitches. We make a slip knot and we have to cast on 36 stitches. Once we have the 36 stitches, here I am making a little sample. We have to start making the 2-2 rib stitch. We have to knit the first stitch because we are at the first row. And we have to work the 2-2 rib stitch to the end of the row. 2 knit stitch, two purl stitch, 2 knit stitch, 2 purl stitch, repeating to the end of the row, and once we have only 1 stitch, we have to knit the last stitch. Continue on the second row with the rib stitch, and we have to repeat the rib stitch to the row number 9. Take the edge stitch, and where we find a knit stitch, we have to knit the stitch. So we have to knit 2, and purl 2, knit 2 and purl 2, repeating to the end of the row. Remember, repeat the rib stitch to the row number 9. Once we have the 9 rows with a rib stitch, remember that here I am making a little sample. We have to work the stockinette stitch from the row 10 to the row 22. Remember, the stockinette stitch is 1 row with purl stitch and 1 row with knit stitch. In this case, we start with a knit stitch row, so we have to knit all the stitches of this row. And once we finished the row number 10, we continue with a stockinette stitch on the row number 11. In this case, now making the row on the wrong side with the purl stitch. The stockinette stitch to the row 22. Once we finish the row number 22, we have to start now making the increases of the sleeves. We take the edge stitch and make one increase. To make the increase, we have to yarn over and continue working the knit stitch to one stitch before the end of the row. Once we are one stitch before of the end of the row, we have to yarn over again, making another increase. We have one increase at the beginning and one increase at the end, and we have to knit the last stitch. From the row 24 to the row 28, we are going to make the stockinette stitch. In this case, on the row number 24, we have the two increases of yarn over. We have to work the purl stitch on the yarn over, but taking the back loop from the back to the front. Continue working the purl stitch to the next yarn over. And repeat the same. We take the yarn over from the back to the front and make the purl stitch. Remember working the stockinette stitch to the row number 28. Once we finish the row number 28, we have to make on the row number 29 again increases. We take the edge stitch, make a yarn over, continue working the stockinette stitch to one stitch before the end, where we make again a yarn over, knit the last stitch. We made the two increases of this row. From the row 30 to the row 34, we have to work again the stockinette stitch. Remember that you have to work the yarn over from the back to the front of the row. We continue working the stockinette stitch to the row 55, making increases on the row 35, 41, 47 and 53. Once we finish the row 55, here you can see the shape of the sleeve. And now we have to start the front part and the back part. We have to cast on 36 stitches here. After the last stitch, we have to cast on 36 stitches. Once we have the 36 stitches, we have to cut the yarn and cast on 36 stitches on the other side of the sleeve. We have to make a slip knot and cast on again 36 stitches on the other side. Once we have the 36 stitches, we have to cut the yarn again. And we join the 36 stitches with the sleeve. Now we have the sleeve, 36 stitches in one side and 36 stitches on the other side. We have to continue knitting where we have the first part, the first group of the 36 stitches. We have to knit the first stitch because it is a new row. And we have to work the stockinette stitch on the 36 stitches. Continue working also the stockinette stitch on the stitches of the sleeve. And once we finish the stockinette stitch on the stitches of the sleeve, we have to continue working also the stockinette stitch on the last 36 stitches. From the row 57 to the row 73, we have to continue working the stockinette stitch in all the stitches that we have on the needles. Work the stockinette stitch. Continue working the stockinette stitch to the row 73. Once we finish the row 73, we have the jacket like this. We have the sleeve and the front part and the back part. What we have to make now is to bind off 62 stitches to the top part. 62 stitches. We have to bind off 62 stitches. Remember how to bind off. We have to take the edge stitch, work the stockinette stitch on the second stitch and pass the first stitch over the second stitch. Repeat the same, make the next stitch and pass the first stitch over the second stitch. Continue binding off 62 stitches. Once we bind off all the stitches, once we bind off the 62 stitches, we have to continue working the stockinette stitch on the stitches that we still have on the needle. Work the stockinette stitch to the end of the row. From the row 75 to the row 111, we have to work the stockinette stitch on the stitches that we have on the needle, that is the back part of the jacket. To the row number 111, work the stockinette stitch. Once we finished all the rows with the stockinette stitch, what we have to make now is to cast on the 62 stitches that we had to bind off before. We have to cast on the 62 stitches. So cast on 62 stitches. Once we have the 62 new stitches, we have to work the stockinette stitch again on all the stitches that we have. for the 62 stitches, and then the stitches that we have on the needle, and then the stitches of the back part. And we continue working the stockinette stitch to the row 128. Once we finish the row 128, we have finished the front part. Now we have to bind off 36 from one side and 36 from the other side, and leave only the stitches of the sleeve. What I am going to make now is to place the stitch marker on the stitch number 36, starting from the end. We place a stitch marker on the stitch number 36, and we have to start binding off 36 stitches from the beginning of the row. We bind off 36 stitches. Once we bind off the 36 stitches, we have to continue with the stockinette stitch to the marker. Once we are at the marker, we have to bind off 36 stitches. Here you can see that we only have now on the needles the stitches of the sleeves. Now we are going to continue working the sleeve. We are going to make the same that we made on the other sleeve, but instead of making increases, we have to make decreases. Now we have to be careful on where we start knitting on this row. We have to start on the part of the last stitches that we had to bind off, and we have to make 2 rows with the stockinette stitch, and we don't have to make decreases now. Now we have to start making decreases. We have to take the edge stitch, and the first decrease that we have to make is we pass the first stitch, knit the second stitch, and pass the first stitch over the second stitch. We made 1 decrease, and we have to continue working the stockinette stitch to 3 stitches before the end. Once we are 3 stitches before the end, we have to make the second decrease. In this case, we have to make a knit 2 together and knit the last stitch. Continue making the stockinette stitch on the next 5 rows. From the row 132 to the row 137, work the stockinette stitch. On the row 138, we have to make again decreases. We have to take the edge stitch, make the first decrease. Remember, we passed the first stitch, knit the second stitch, and pass the first stitch over the second stitch. Continue working the knit stitch to the end, to 3 stitches before the end, where we have to make a knit 2 together and work the last stitch. We continue working 5 rows with the stockinette stitch. We continue working the decreases and the row with decreases and 5 more rows with the stockinette stitch to the row 156, making a row with decreases. From the row 157 to the row 159, we have to work the stockinette stitch. Now we don't have to make decreases. And when we finish the row 159, we have to work now 9 rows with the rib stitch 2-2, with a 2-2 rib stitch. Remember, we take the edge stitch, work, we knit 2, purl 2, knit 2, and continue working the 2-2 rib stitch to have 9 rows. Once we finish the rib stitch, we have to bind off all the stitches of the sleeve. We bind off all the stitches. Once we finish the last sleeve, we have to make the front part and the back. Now we have to make the seat stitch. We have to pick up stitches from the front part, the back part, and the other front part. Remember how we can pick up the stitches. We have to take the needle, take the yarn from the back part, pass the needle through the next stitch and take the yarn from the back part. Repeat the same on the next stitch. Take the yarn from the back part using the needle, and repeat the same on the next stitch and repeat. And we have to pick up all the stitches of the front part. Once we are at the back part, we have to pick up one stitch on the knot. Here you can see the knot. We have to pick up one stitch from here and one stitch from the space between the two knots. One stitch from the knot and one stitch from the stitch in between the knots. Once we pick up all the stitches of the back part, we have to continue picking up all the stitches of the other front part. Once we have now all the stitches on the needles, we have to work the seat stitch. Remember how to make the seat stitch. We have to knit one, and purl one. Knit one and purl one, knit one and purl one, and repeat knit one and purl one to the end of the row. Once we finish the first row of the seat stitch, we have to continue working the seat stitch to the row number 28. Remember, on the second row of the seat stitch, where we find a knit stitch, we have to purl, and where we find a purl, we have to knit. Purl, knit, purl, knit, repeating the same to the end of the row. And now I'm going to show you how to make the buttonholes. We have to make 3 buttonholes, one at the 5 centimeters, one at 15 centimeters, and one at 25 centimeters. We have to work the seat stitch to arrive at the centimeter number 5, where we have to knit 2 together, yarn over again, and knit 2 together again. Continue working the seat stitch to the next space of the buttonhole at 15 centimeters. Where we have to knit 2 together, yarn over again, and knit 2 together, and repeat the same on the centimeter number 25. And continue working the seat stitch to the end of the row. We continue working the seat stitch again on the next row, and when we arrive at the buttonholes, we have to work also the seat stitch. Here you can see the original jacket, and once we finished the row of the buttonholes, we have to continue making 5 more rows with the seat stitch, 5 more rows working the seat stitch. And we only have to bind off all the stitches. We have to sew the buttons on the other side of the front part, and we have to sew the sleeves and the sides of the jacket. And once we made and then we finished the jacket. Remember that you can find the pattern for other sizes in our website, and also you can buy the materials in our online store.